Well, Omar Khadr is going to file an appeal with a U.S. civilian federal court. He wants the court to overturn his conviction on murder, terrorism, and spying charges. A military tribunal convicted Khadr on those charges in 2010. 8 years earlier, he had thrown a grenade and killed an American soldier in Afghanistan. Minister of Public Safety Vic Taves just released a statement saying Khadr is a, quote, convicted terrorist. But Khadr's lawyer insists the military tribunal's convictions are not valid. Well, we're joined by Omar Khadr's Canadian lawyer, Dennis Edney. He's in Edmonton. Dennis, thanks for being with us. Khadr pled guilty to war crimes charges just in 2010. Why the appeal now?
Well, there should have been an appeal filed some time ago. And just recently, when I came back on the case, that I was lobbying the military defense in Washington to take up the Khadr appeal, and they chose to do so. And I've been working with Sam Morrison, Appellate Counsel, and we expect to be filing quite shortly.
Dennis, given that he has pled guilty and he gave up his right to appeal at that time, what gives him the right to file now?
Well, that question is along the lines of what the Minister Taves you just quoted. He said he's a convicted terrorist. I would suggest that Mr. Taves learned some international law. That the charges against Omar Khadr. Hello, are you still there? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, Dennis.
Okay. The charges against Mr. Khadr are not recognized as international law of war charges. In fact, I argued that in the military commission process a long time ago, and it was not upheld by the military commission. But recently, as far as last October, in rulings by the federal court, the district court in Washington, on Mr. Hamdan and Mr. Al-Balou, the Civilian Appeals Court overturned the terrorism convictions on that same issue. They said they're not recognized law of war charges.
All right, help me understand this. So you're saying that despite his conviction in the military tribunal in the U.S., that is not recognized as international law?
In international law, the convictions are not recognized charges under international law. They're not law of war charges. That was an argument that was made in court and in the military commission court, and the judge didn't agree. But it was never tested outside the military commission process. Now we have the U.S. Civilian Appeals Court rule that, in fact, that's correct. That status is correct. That these are not law of war charges. And in two rulings, one last October and one in January, the Civilian Appeals Court overturned similar charges against two former Guantanamo detainees, as Omar was charged with.
But Dennis, during his week-long trial, I get a sense of what you're trying to say here. That was a military court. You're appealing to a civilian court now. During his week-long trial, he made a remorseful apology to the American Army medic's wife. He also agreed not to appeal. It's hard now for Canadians to hear this. What would be different in his appeal now?
I don't know why it'd be hard for Canadians to hear this. When you say he pled guilty in Guantanamo Bay, you're disregarding, or the public, whoever that public that you're referring to, is disregarding the context. That Guantanamo Bay and its legal system there was characterized by the Canadian Supreme Court as beyond the rule of law. The same Supreme Court of Canada and many other particular individuals have recognized that Guantanamo is a place of torture, where waterboarding and other forms of torture take place, and that Omar Khadr was tortured there. And so any statement made by Omar Khadr in the course of a so-called trial in Guantanamo. And remember, in Guantanamo, that he was not allowed to call any real witnesses to speak on his behalf. Evidence of torture was not allowed into the court proceedings. And self-defense was not allowed to be pled. And the argument that those charges against him are not law of war charges was not allowed. So that whole, when we talk about a trial, don't think of it in terms of due process.
Okay. Dennis, Khadr has been in a maximum security prison now in Kingston, Ontario since October. How's he doing there?
Well, it's quite the adjustment. Here's a young man who has spent 10 years in a hellhole called Guantanamo Bay and he spent 10 years in Guantanamo Bay. And now he's in Millhaven maximum security. And how's he doing? Well, he's a survivor. I just think it's a disgrace. We have people who go to jail every day who commit all kinds of horrible acts. And I challenge you to find someone, particularly a Canadian, who's been so misused and so misunderstood and so abused as Omar Khadr.
Dennis, I know you've been by Khadr's side for a long time. I'm running out of time here, and I need you to keep this brief, but I wanted to ask you, Khadr fired his lawyers back in 2011, including you. Now you're back representing him. What made you stick with his case?
Well, I believe in him, and there's a story to be told. We don't have enough time as to why Omar Khadr was persuaded to fire myself and my co-counsel. That's for another day. Mr. Khadr approached me, and when he got back into Canada, and asked me to come back, and he explained why he had been manipulated into firing us. But to answer your question, if one really reads the story of Guantanamo, the context of Omar Khadr's detention, the fact that there was no evidence to show that Omar Khadr killed anybody, and here he was facing the possibility of spending 40 years of his further years in Guantanamo, who amongst us would not have pled guilty? So I believe in Omar Khadr.
Right.
I believe that Omar Khadr should have got a fair trial, and due process should have been followed, and our Canadian government, had an observer throughout that trial, and they would know, and they do know, what a fake trial it was. So I believe in him. And if this government wishes to put Omar Khadr up on trial in Canada, I would look forward to that. So
Dennis, I'm completely out of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to break this down for us. I hope we do talk to you again soon.
All right. You take care.